I'm Maxime Bernier, the leader of the People's Party of Canada. I founded and we created the People's Party in 2018. And, I'm very pleased because I'm fighting for real conservative common sense values. Yeah, first, you must ask that question to Pierre Poilievre and the Conservative Party of Canada. They're scared, I believe. They're scared of the mainstream media. And as you know, the goal of Pierre Poilievre is to split the Liberal vote. He wants to have support in big Liberal cities like Toronto and Vancouver. And wokeism is very popular in these big cities. So for us as a People's Party, we will always fight for what is good for this party. I'm the only leader who's speaking against the gender ideology. For me and the PPC, there's only two sexes. And I think it's important to speak for the people and common sense. But Poilievre, it's all about, try to be in power. And I believe that's why he's silent on important issues for the future of our country. Yeah, we must stop mass immigration. Actually, we receive in Canada double per capita what other Western countries are receiving as newcomers and immigrants. So it's not sustainable. We must have a sustainable immigration policy. Our immigration policy must be written in Canada for Canadians, not looking at the UN like the Conservative and the Liberals. So on mass immigration, the Conservative and Liberals are the same. They have the same ideology. They want more people in Canada. And actually, Poilievre said that we must accept quickly are people that are that want people who want to be Canadians. So for us, we need to have immigration that will be sustainable. And actually, because of that mass immigration policy promoted by the Liberals and the Conservative, we have that housing crisis in this country. And the only way to solve that is to stop the mass immigration, and we will do it. But for Poilievre and the Liberals, they are pandering to immigrants, and they want to have their support. For us, I believe that, you're a Canadian, and if you want to come here, you must share our values. But also, it's a privilege to be Canadian, and that's why we are not for open borders. Yeah, it's a shame that in this country we don't have any legislation on abortion. And the conservative, the liberals don't want to reopen that debate. I believe that we must have a legislation on abortion. We are the only Western country who doesn't have a legislation on abortion. So yes, and personally I'm against late-term abortion. It's a murder, and I'm against sex selection abortion. We must have that debate here in Canada. So yes, we are open for that debate, and everybody will be free to vote in line with their conscience. Contrary to the Conservative and the Liberals, they are pro-life and pro-abortion, pro-late-term abortion. We must be against that. Yes, actually, I must say that I voted for that when I was a conservative. At that time, it was supposed to be only for the end of life. But that's not the case anymore. And I'm looking at what is happening in our country. Yes, we are promoting assisted suicide. And for me, it must be illegal, it must be criminal for a doctor or a health professional to promote that. It's going too far right now. We are promoting death in our country with abortion and assisted suicide, and I believe that we must promote life. So I'm against the what is happening right now. The fact that assisted suicide, it's not anymore for the end of life, but it can be almost for everybody. So we must stop that, and that's the position of the People's Party of Canada. We are pro. We believe that life is important, and so that's why it must be criminal to promote assisted suicide. Yeah, we had that huge deficit because of Trudeau and Poilievre. They voted for the COVID-19 programs, and that's why we have that deficit today. And I said in the beginning that during COVID-19, I was the only leader to say that the economy must be reopened and people must be able to decide if they want the shots or not. And I was fighting for freedom of choice. But Poilievre and the Conservatives were in the House and approving everything that Trudeau did. So we are able to balance the budget if you have the courage of your conviction. And yes, we will balance the budget in our first year. Contrary to Poilievre and the Conservative, what they're doing right now and what they're seeing, they like a big fat government. This government spend a lot of money, that money that we don't have by increasing our deficit. Poilievre is okay with that. He only wants to freeze the budget like that, and he will replace liberals' expenses by a conservative expense. So for us, we need to cut the budget. We need to balance the budget. And we can do that in 1 year. And the way to do that is to cut foreign aid. We can save $5 billion over there. To cut also CBC, we can save $1.2 billion there. We can cut also corporate welfare. The federal government is giving money to big corporations, like the last one, $13 billion to Volkswagen. In one corporation, $13 billion. And Pierre Poilievre was silent about that. So it's $13 billion. It is half of the defense budget. Imagine what we can do with $13 billion. So let's stop corporate welfare and we'll save a lot of money and we'll be able to balance the budget. And after that, to lower taxes to every single Canadian. Yeah, you're right to say about the central bank digital currency and the fact that the Bank of Canada is creating inflation. We are against a central bank digital currency. I believe that's important to protect our privacy. What is a central bank digital currency? A central bank digital currency is, all the transaction that you're doing with your bank right now, private transaction. You go to your bank and you look at your bank account and your credit card, and you see all your transaction and everything that you did. So that's a transaction between information between you and your banker, and that's private. But if you have a central bank GDT, all that log, all that information, all that data will be between you and the central bank. So the central bankers, the bureaucrats, and the government will know everything about you and your transaction. So that's why we must be against that. And that, that is a project. The Liberal government said in not the last budget, but the one before, in 2021, they spent $15 million for the Bank of Canada and the Finance Department, the Finance Department, to look at a central bank digital currency. So the federal government is spending money right now to be ready for that project to be tabled in the House of Commons as soon as possible. We will vote against that. And also for the Bank of Canada, they are creating inflation. 2% inflation every year. 6% inflation is bad, 20% inflation is bad, 2% inflation is bad. When you have inflation, your purchasing power is going down and everybody is poor. We must tell the Bank of Canada to have a 0% inflation target. Like that, everybody will keep their purchasing power. But the Conservative and the Liberals and the NDP won't speak about that. They're okay with the inflation created by the Bank of Canada. But we must stop that. And so that's a big reform that we must do with the Bank of Canada. Yeah, but that's why we must stop that. We must stop that project. What I know what the federal government in Canada wants to do. And yes, they want to implement a central bank digital currency. When that will happen, like I said before, all your data will be between you and the central bank. And so if you're, spending too much money on gas, the central bankers and the politicians can say, oh no, we must save the planet and climate change is important, so you won't be able to go to a gas station to spend your money. So that's information that the government will try to use to control your behavior. We must stop that. I don't know the details of the project that they have in the US, but every central banker are looking to implement a central bank digital currency. And that must stop. Yeah, like I said before, CO2 is not a pollution. CO2 is a gas for life. That's what I'm emitting right now when I'm speaking to you. So that being said, if we want to stop that climate hysteria, and you're right by saying the climate is changing and will always change. If you want to stop that, there's no climate emergency. We need to withdraw from the Paris Accord. And for the Liberals and the Conservative, they agree with the Paris Accord. They will impose targets to fight climate change. Trudeau will impose a carbon tax. Poilievre will impose more regulations on businesses. But when you have more regulation on businesses, businesses will transfer that cost to the consumers and will pay higher prices for our products. So for us, it's simple. We won't do anything about the climate, and we won't sign the Paris Accord. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord, and so that's why you won't have a carbon tax. You won't have any regulations to fight climate change. The climate will always change, and there's no climate emergency. Yeah, we are the only national political party that is fighting for peace and prosperity and a ceasefire. That's we don't have. It's not our war. I don't know why we are there. And this government is spending $8 billion. We don't have that money. We are broke, and we are spending money that we don't have, creating a bigger deficit. I'm not pro-Russia. I'm not pro-Ukraine, but it's not our war. Why being part of that? And Poilievre and the Conservative, the NDP, the Bloc Québécois, all these establishment political parties are in favor of that war. That's the tradition and the history of our country, to fight for peace making and peacekeeping. We must do that with Ukraine. We must try to put Putin and Zelensky at the same table and having a ceasefire as soon as possible. There's more than 200,000 Ukrainians who died because of that war. Just look at it, and with the common sense and arguing for a ceasefires. I'm pleased that in the U.S. some other politicians also are doing that, but here in Canada I'm the only one, that is costly, and that's not in our advantage as a country. Look what we did in the war in Iraq. We had a liberal government at that time, and Chrétien decided not to participate in that war. That was the right decision. So Canada is well known to promote peace and peacemaking and peacekeeping, and that must be our role. what we must do, we must put more resources and to the RCMP and to, first of all, to do that fight against the criminals that are using, by the way, not registered firearms to do their crimes. They're using illegal firearms, and so we must stop that. Now we have legislation in Canada that is focusing on law-abiding Canadians, and we will abolish these legislation. Go on our website, read our platform, peoplespartyofcanada.ca, firearms, and we believe that you have the right to own a firearm, and that's your property also. But we must change the legislation in Canada to be sure that the RCMP or anyone will be able to decide tomorrow that your firearm is now illegal. So let's abolish everything that Trudeau did on firearms, and being sure to implement a legislation that will respect the rights of law-abiding gun owner firearms. And I believe that what Trudeau is doing, it's the opposite of fighting against crimes. It's fighting against farmers and people who are using firearms for sport and sport shootings and things like that. So we must have the right to go hunting without having all these bureaucratic things that we must respect. I believe that everything that Trudeau did about firearms have to be repealed. That's it. It's simple. We will repeal it. We don't need that bill. We are against censorship by big corporation or by the big fat government in Ottawa. Yeah, for the 15-minute cities, it's under the provincial jurisdiction, but we won't promote that, and we will cut funding, infrastructure funding, to be sure that that won't happen. But we cannot pass a legislation. It's under the jurisdiction of the provincial government. We will respect the Constitution. That's very important. But also, we will cut funding to municipalities for infrastructure. And so I think that will be a great incentive to not do things like that. Absolutely. We are a sovereign country. We can do that. And we are the only national political party that is saying that. The Conservative and the Liberal are okay with the UN and the Migration Compact, with the UN and the Paris Accord. We will withdraw from the Paris Accord. We won't sign the Migration Compact. Our policies must be done here in Canada for Canadians. The World Health Organization, we will do like actually the Alberta government did with Danielle Smith. She said that she does not want her civil servant to work with the World Health Organization. So we'll do the same. Same thing for the World Economic Forum. We won't participate in these organizations because they are socialist organizations, and our goal is to promote our sovereignty. And if I may add, for the UN, we can save a lot of money because we won't give money to the UN if they're not promoting our values. And as you know, the UN is a dysfunctional socialist organization, and I believe that we can save a lot of money. And that would be important also to be able to balance the budget. We'll do nothing about that. We won't participate in that, and that will be it. We will, we will work on our own priorities here in Canada, and that these goals are not our goals, and that's why we won't follow that. We won't participate in the UN nation sustainable goals. We won't be part of that because we will develop our own goals for our own priority here in Canada. Yeah, as you know, I'm not a globalist, and I'm a Canadian. I believe in Canada, in our country. So the way to stop that is to speak against it and not participating as a country, and explain that to Canadians that we have to develop our own legislation here in Canada, and the fact that we won't participate in that will be just good for the country. So the more you speak against it, the better it is, and more people will understand that we need to fight for our country and for our people first. You're right by saying that the ESG it's something that that's the UN is imposing on businesses to try to direct their investment in things that are not maybe profitable for a corporation. So we want our goal is we believe in a free markets, and a corporation must be able to invest in their business and in other business if they want, but without having the pressure of the UN, because actually if a corporation is not respecting these goals, it can be difficult for a corporation to have funding. So that's why I believe that we need to pass a legislation here in Canada saying that nobody can force a corporation to invest in something that is not profitable for that corporation. And right now, with these goals, they try to have corporations that will do things that are not in favor of their stockholders. And so that's why we will fight against that for sure. Yeah, you know, these globalists and socialists um, want to impose to us their ideas, and we won't accept that. We believe that in a free market, and everybody must be free to do what they want to do. But they have huge inflation in Venezuela and other countries because they are creating money out of thin air. And so that's, we will stop that in Canada. The Bank of Canada won't be able to create money out of thin air. And also at the same time, we will develop our natural resources. That's important. We have a lot of natural resources, shale gas, oil and gas industry. And for us, there's no question to transition, like Trudeau said, from oil and gas to another source of energy. Oil and gas is a sustainable source of energy. The sun may not be there tomorrow, and the wind may not be there tomorrow, but the best energy, it's nuclear, oil and gas, and we will promote that, and we'll say to the Bank of Canada at the same time, we don't want any inflation. So we will create the economic conditions for having more prosperity in our country. So we will give more autonomy to the First Nation. Actually, everything is decided in Ottawa right now. They cannot do anything. We want them to be part of our society. We want them to be able to have, for example, property rights on reserve. We will have a new contract with them. We will abolish the Indian Act, and by doing that, we will have a new relationship. You know, there's no systemic racism in this country, but there's a systemic legislation that is racist, and that is the Indian Act. We must abolish that. We are the only party that is speaking for that. And so the problem of drinking water on reserve must not be a problem that Ottawa must solve. It must be a problem that First Nation must be able to solve by giving them more autonomy. And I believe it will happen. Yes, actually, I will run in the by-election in Portage-Lisgard. I'm very pleased to announce that. Actually, that's a riding where we did very well. The People's Party, we had 22% at the last election. We have a strong organization there. And, you know, it's a rural riding, like my former riding in Beauce. And I like people over there. I'll be with them during the by-election. I will work hard to be elected. And I know also, you know, I was arrested nearby for a non-crime when I was fighting for freedom of choice and during the COVID hysteria era. So I believe that people in Portage-Lisgard and we share the same values. And, you know, I want to fight for families. I want to fight for real conservative values. And I want to give a voice to the voiceless. Actually, you know, the conservative candidate can say everything in the riding, but when he'll be in Ottawa, he'll be silent because the Conservative Party is politically correct, and I'll be your voice in Ottawa. So I'm ready. It's a nice challenge. I'm ready to meet people, door knocking, and having a nice discussion with you, and being your representative for Portage-Lisgard at the next by-election. It may happen soon. We don't know. But I believe that Trudeau will call that by-election sooner than later. Yeah, I want people to understand that the People's Party of Canada is doing politics differently. And for me, that's not a slogan, that's the reality. We are doing politics based on four principles: individual freedom, personal responsibility, respect, and fairness. And all our policies are in line with these principles. So that's why if, you know, like we have a strong position on sustainable immigration. I spoke about it at the first election for us in 2019. We created the party in 2018, and that was not popular at that time, but it was important for the future of this country. And so that's why it's part of our policy. We don't do politics based on focus group and polling, and we don't do any polls. What we are doing politics based on principle, and the more we speak about our ideas, the more popular they will become. And that's why it's very different than the conservative and the liberals. They're not leading, they're following the public opinion. But sometimes the public opinion is misleading by the media, and you need to be there to inform the population, and that's the goal of the People's Party. That's why we will always have the same platform. We are not creating a new electoral platform for every election. What I said in 2019, it was the same thing in 2021, and that will be the same thing at the next general election. So if you want to do that fight with us, to fight for what you believe, to be part of the change, you know, go on our website, read our policies at People's Party of Canada.ca, and you can become a member. You can donate to our party. You can speak to your friends and your family about the party, because we cannot count on the mainstream media to give us visibility, because they know if we have more visibility, we will grow faster, and they're not for promoting any real common sense values, and that's what we are doing at the PPC. So thank you for your time, and I hope that you'll take some time to read our policies and to vote in line with your values.